Alright, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And I've been going through the PowerPoint presentations for Murachs, JavaScript, and jQuery 3rd edition. I am currently beginning Chapter 6 of 18, and as you can see, Chapter 6 is on how to script the DOM, which is the Document Object Model, with JavaScript. Our two applied objectives: develop DOM scripting applications that work with forms and controls, including apps that add nodes to the DOM. Number 2, use Chrome's developer tools to see changes that your JavaScript has made to the DOM. Our knowledge objectives, and it looks like there are 10 of them. Describe the use of the document object model in JavaScript apps. Describe these properties of the node interface of the DOM: node value, parent node, child nodes, first child, last child, and next element sibling. Describe the following methods of the document element and element interfaces for the DOM: get elements by tag name, get elements by name, and get elements by class name. Describe the following methods of the element interface of the DOM: has attribute, get attribute, set attribute, and remove attribute. Explain how the DOM HTML specification can simplify coding when compared to the DOM core spec. Describe the use of a form, submit button, and reset button. Describe the use of text box, text area, select, radio, and checkbox objects. Describe the following methods for working with forms and controls: submit, reset, focus, and blur. Describe the following events for working with controls: on focus, on blur, on click, on double click, on change, and on select. And finally, describe the process of adding nodes to the DOM with the inner HTML method. Now, before we get started, all right, I have shown you this site before, but I'm going to go to W3 Schools. In fact, I'm going to type in here W3 Schools JavaScript DOM tutorial. And it brings me to right here. And it is definitely in your best interest to take the time to go out to that website. Again, all you need is the w3schools.com. From there you can probably search for it, but if you go to JS, it's JavaScript, and then it's the HTML DOM.asp file. That is a tutorial on the document object model. If we look along the sides here, it shows you what's in there: a DOM intro, DOM methods, DOM document, DOM elements, DOM HTML, DOM CSS, animating with a DOM, DOM events, DOM event listener, DOM navigation, DOM nodes, DOM collections, and DOM lists. Plus, it goes through the BOM, which is the browser object model. So it talks about, we've talked about this in an earlier chapter, so I really probably should have referenced it back then. Talks about the window object, the screen object, the location object, the history object, the navigator object, a pop-up alert, using timers, and using cookies. Definitely is worth a read. Okay? All right. Now, let's suppose that we create this document right here. And I'm just going to literally grab all of their code. Not going to be very much in here as of right now. I believe they build this as the chapter goes on. So let me move over to here. And this is an email list, so I'm just going to put it on the desktop, and I'm going to call it email list.html. All right, not much in there right now, but let's run it and see what it looks like. Okay, so right now it just looks like this: please join our email list. Okay, and there's an asterisk here, and there's a text box where I can put something in. That's it. But what you may or may not realize is, even after we do all of this right here, what ends up happening when we do that is certain things end up getting built for us in the background. What do I mean? This is what I mean. All right? Now, what I'm going to try to do is see if I can keep this up, and I'm going to bring up that other document and shrink it down. Kind of like this. All right, so notice at the top we've got HTML. All right, everybody can see that. And that's right here. under HTML, we've got a head and we've got a body. Okay, there's the head, and pretty much the rest of the document, there's the body. Okay, under the head, we've got a title and we've got text. Well, there's the title, there, and there is the text right here. Under the body, we first have an H1 tag, which is here. That H1 tag has text. Then we have a form tag. That form tag has what in it? It has a label. It has an input text or a text box. And it has a span tag. The label and the span tag have text. The label and the span tag have text. So what I'm trying to tell you is when we create this, behind the scenes, invisible basically to you and I, JavaScript is creating this, which is the document object model for that particular page. Now, that's fine. I'm not naive enough to assume that, okay, I just explained it to you, it makes perfect sense, we all got it now. So let's talk about it. Document elements that you commonly use. All right, this is the document right here. Elements. These things that are in blue are elements. Attributes. Well, this text is an element of the title element. The text is an element of the H1. This is an attribute of the H1 element, etc. All right, and I showed you what the text was. Some of the properties that we're going to be working with in here. So again, I should back up. The document is the root node of the DOM. It's at the top. It can have only one element node as a child node. The element is an element in a web page. An element can have other elements. It can have text. It can have comment nodes. An ATTR is an attribute of an element. Even though it's matched with an element node, it isn't considered a child. All right, it's because it can have text under it. A text element cannot have a child. It's where it ends, basically, for lack of better words. These are also known as leaf nodes. Leaf node, leaf node, leaf node, leaf node, and since there's no text here, leaf node. So the DOM, or document object model, represents a hierarchical collection of nodes that are basically in the web browser memory, and they represent the current web page. It's built as the page is loaded by the web browser. You can use JavaScript then to modify the web page in the browser by modifying the DOM. Whenever you change the DOM, the web page displays the results of the change. So we have here node value for a text node or a comment node or an attribute node. This returns the text that's stored inside of that node. Otherwise, it returns null. The parent node returns the parent node if one does exist, or if one doesn't exist, it returns null. The child node returns an array of node objects representing the child nodes of a node. If there aren't any, the array is empty. First child returns the node object for the first child node of a node. If there isn't one, it returns null. Last child returns a node object for the last child of a node. If there aren't any, it returns null. And next element sibling returns a node object for the next sibling, text sibling of a node. And if there isn't any, it returns null. So what you have here basically is we're talking about setting up an interface. The interface describes the properties and methods for an object. When you script with a DOM, you typically use the properties that are shown here. These are properties of the node interface. All right? There are examples here. Again, this was our text. And you'll notice that unlike, well, I guess it pretty much is, I think, the original text. All right? And if you notice, we have what? We have an ID here of email address. We have an ID here of join list. The form has an ID of email list, etc. So now we can work with these things. How to get the text of an HTML element with email error as its ID. Remember, this we would put at the top. We saw this in an earlier chapter. This would be an alias for document.getElementById. So we're saying find an HTML element called email error, all right, and its first child get its node value, which is again trying to say get the text. So where is it? Well, where is email error? Right there. Where's the text? It's the asterisk. All right. Now notice there this is on the right hand side of an equal sign, so that's called a getter. We're grabbing that information. Now it's on the left hand side of the equal sign, so it's a setter. Get the text, set the text. What that would do, this line right here, is that would change that asterisk, would remove it, replace it with entry is invalid. And if we wanted to reset it again, this is how we do it. Next sibling. So the next sibling of this, which is the asterisk. All right, first child node value, which is what's in there, equal double quote, double quote. So that would remove it, so there would be nothing in there. That may or may not have made a lot of sense right now, but again, ideally it makes more sense the more we go through it. All right. Some of the common methods of the document and element interfaces: get elements by tag name, returns an array of all element objects descended from the document or element that have a tag that matches what you're looking for. So for instance, I could put inside of here P, and that would get all paragraph tags. Get elements by name, returns an array of all element objects described from the document or element that have a name, not a tag, but a name attribute that matches the specified value. And get elements by class name, returns an array of all element objects descended from the document or element that have a class attribute with that name. All right. Notice the capitalization, the E in elements, the B in by is capitalized. Before that, every other letter is lowercase. The T in tag and the N in name are capitalized. The N in name is capitalized. The C in class and the N in name are capitalized. Again, this is known as camel case notation. Some common elements of methods of the element interface: has attribute returns true if the element has the attribute property specified in its name and false otherwise. Get attribute returns the value of the attribute specified in the name or an empty string if it has not yet been set. Set attribute sets the attribute specified to the specified value. All right, if that particular attribute does not currently exist, it will also create it. And remove attribute removes the specified attribute. These methods typically work and allow you to work with, many of them do, allow you to work with the ones up here with an array, okay, of elements. These let you work with attributes of elements. And there are some examples here. This isn't going to make a lot of sense until you do it. The best way to do it is to sit there and create yourself a very simple web page, put a form on it, all right, and start monkeying with it. Make sure you've got IDs on everything and start using a bunch of these properties. All right, an even better way to begin is to go through that tutorial that I mentioned to you earlier. So this would create an array of all anchor tags. This would create an array of all LI tags within a UL element. And that would be for everything inside of image list. You can test for and get an attribute. Again, if it has that attribute, do something. You can set an attribute where, again, it appears on the right-hand side of an equal sign. You can remove an attribute where you do the remove attribute. So set, remove, and get. Now they talk about the HTML Dom specification here. You can go in and click on that if you want. I will tell you, and I'm not just saying this for lack of better words, it's a very dry read. But it's got virtually everything you'd ever want to know about it, but it's put in a technical kind of format. Probably not the best thing to go through when you're first learning. Okay? Some of the properties that are available to you from within the DOM spec are shown here. Okay, all elements can have an ID, a title, and a class name. Can have a tag name. Anchor elements have an href attribute. Images must have a source, and today must have an alt attribute. Input elements, as an example, can be disabled. All right? So the DOM spec they mention in here, as it ends up, it can simplify your code. Once you understand how the DOM works, you can use the DOM so that behind the scenes you can add, which is very oftentimes interactivity to your web page by using the HTML or the DOM HTML spec. And there's examples given in here, okay? All right, so these are some of the terms you have to come into contact with and you have to get some familiarity with. The DOM, document object, and I think that's a mistake. It's not document object module. It's not, I know that. I think that's a mistake. It should be document object model. Amazing when people don't proof their stuff. The DOM core spec, which is again what's written back here. An interface, which we just mentioned, starting to talk about DOM scripting and the DOM HTML spec. So the next thing they do here is they use JavaScript in an actual application. All right? And it's the next 4 or so pages. What they use is they create what's called an FAQ, or a frequently asked questions page. All right? So if the user clicks on something here with a plus sign, okay, then the text below it is displayed and the text changes from a plus to a minus sign. If you click on the minus sign, the text disappears and the minus sign turns into a plus sign. So let's just put in the text and see what happens. And this is an FAQ page, so we'll call this FAQ.html. Again, this is a super good way for you to learn this stuff. Put it in here yourself. All right, now I don't have the beginning stuff, so let me go back to my email list, grab all that, put it in here. I'm going to change the name because this is no longer an email list. So I'm going to say FAQ page. All right, then I'm going to go down to the bottom here. I think all that should be left is this. All right, so I'm going to save this, and I'll just save it again right to the desktop as FAQ.html. All right, now we haven't put any JavaScript in yet. So when I do this and I run and show it, it's not going to do anything. See that? Doesn't look like much right now, and that's fine. All right. So in the HTML, each of the questions is coded, all right? Each of the questions is coded in here. 1, 2, and I'm looking at it. What is jQuery? And I don't know where it says 3 reasons. I think I left a little bit of this out. So let's go back. I did. So that was the rest of it. We've already got the body tag, so we can leave that out. And put that in here. All right. So let's see our new updated page, which should now have 3 questions on it, where the old one had 2. There they are. Okay? So the idea is we're going to have a plus sign over here. And when we click it, all you'll see is the link. And then when you click on the plus sign, then the code below will show. And if you click on it again, it'll go away. So we'll do that in just a moment. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to put in the CSS, because right now, as you already saw, it sure as heck doesn't look like much. So I'm going to open up a new file here. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint slides. I'm going to go down to the next slide, and there's my CSS. Okay, let's put that in. There's our CSS. I'm going to just save this. We'll call it FAQ.css. All right. But now we have to link to that in here, which we're not doing right now. So let's do that. We've got to do that up here. So under our title, we'll put in link href equals FAQ.css. All right. Rel for the relationship equals style sheet. Okay. Now let's see if we made this look a little nicer. Oh, wrong file. Sorry. There it is. Okay. Notice now they're hyperlinked. Nothing's happening yet because there's no JavaScript in there. But it is looking nicer. We made the stuff disappear. So we've got to create one more file, and that will be FAQ.js. That'll be our JavaScript file. Right now it's totally empty. But since we're doing that, let's also include that. So we'll include that up above here. Script source equals FAQ.js, and then end our script tag. All right. Right now it's not going to do a darn thing because we haven't put the code in here yet. We're going to do that right now. Let me check my time here. All right, I'm getting up there, so I'm going to finish this part, and then we'll stop for now, I think. So here is the JavaScript. I don't know if this is all of it or not. We'll look in a minute. Notice we're doing the use strict. All right, it is on two different pages, which is fine. So there's our first page. Here is our second page. All right, I'm going to save this, and let's go back. I've never done this before, so let's see. Oh, again, I've got to run the right one. All right, so you can see what happens. I don't see our plus and minuses, but the rest of it is working. That's good. Come on, Jeff. All right, so before we go on to this email list that's here, which I don't want to do right now, let's take a look at the JavaScript that was actually put in here. All right, we talked a little bit about the associated HTML file. All right, FAQ.html, we looked at that. And I explained that to you. And here's the CSS. There's not really that much to it. Again, I like to pretty up my CSS a little bit, do a little bit of moving stuff around, and etc. I think it makes it easier to see what's going on. You may or may not agree with what I'm doing here. All right. The file does get bigger, but to me it's worth it because it makes the file much easier to work with. You will end up writing your CSS the way you're comfortable writing it. And that's exactly what you should be doing at this point in your programmatic careers. All right, so what are we doing in here? Well, here we're setting both our anchor tags here. We're giving a color of black with no text decoration, but when they have the focus or when we're hovering, we want them to go from black to blue. All right. Then we're saying our H2s should have this plus and minus. That's why I'm not getting anything, because I don't have the plus ping and the minus ping in here. All right. So let's do this. I don't want to spend a lot of time doing this, but let me see if I have those files. Okay, there's a plus ping right there, so I'm going to copy that. And what I'll do is on my desktop here, I will add a directory. On my desktop here, I will add a directory called images. And in that directory, I will first put up the plus sign, and I will grab the minus sign. Copy that. Come back over. Paste that in. All right, now let's go back and refresh. And it's not showing anything. Doggone it. Well, I thought that would be probably way too easy. Desktop images, minus.ping, plus.ping. Images, plus.ping, minus.ping. Not sure what the problem with that is. Shouldn't need to have the double quotes here. Thought it would work without it. What could have happened, though, is I may not have saved this. That's very well what could have happened. All right, so let's double check. So we'll go back to our FAQ file and run it again. Nope, we still don't have our plus signs. Hopefully we're going to get those back in just a minute. All right, but what that's saying is a regular H2 should have the plus sign. The H2 with minus should have the minus sign. So those H2s. All right. The div has two different styles. The first has a div of none, which hides the contents of the div element. All right. The second one applies to div elements with a class attribute set to open. That displays them as block, which means the contents of the div are displayed. All right. With the HTML and the CSS set up like this, the JavaScript, its job is to turn these classes on and off when the user clicks on a heading. So that's what you see in the JavaScript here that's on page 175 in your book. All right, so let's kind of take it from the top here. We've got the uStrict at the top. The first thing that we're doing is we're setting up that alias again. And again, this is how I write it. This is how I set up unnamed functions. So this says whenever you use the $sign, you're using it to replace this. All right. This is followed here by, as it says, this is an event handler for the click event for each H2 element. So every time you click an H2, all right, we want to do all of this stuff that's in here. If it has a class, remove it, otherwise add it. So this class, if it has class, remove it, otherwise set it to minus. So this is going to toggle back and forth, toggle the plus and the minus in the H2 elements. This says if it has the class, remove it, otherwise set it to open. And what this is doing right here is this is associating when you start the application up, each event handler with its particular tag. All right. Not sure right now why I'm not getting the plus signs. I'm not, as you can see. They are not there unless, no. So it's working. It's just not giving me the plus signs and the minus signs. So again, looking back on this, these first two statements that are in the onload event handler create an array of the H2 elements with the FAQs as its ID. The for loop that's in here is executed once for each of the H2 elements. It attaches the toggle event so that you're able to toggle the plus and minus sign. If the code for the toggle event, in that code, the this keyword refers to the current H2 element, the one that you just clicked. We'll talk more about the this in Chapter 12. Now, just to show you, and I could be wrong here, but I'm going to try something just for the heck of it. And that is, I'm going to go back to, this is the book. All right. So this is Chapter 6. And this is FAQs. And I want to run it, see if indeed it works correctly. See the plus sign, the minus sign? I'm not getting my CSS to show either, but this is what's supposed to happen. All right. Which says to me, too, that the problem could even be in my CSS. I'm 100% certain I did save that. Yeah, it's been saved. But for some reason, it doesn't like what I'm trying to do here. All right. I'd have to look at it. I don't have the time to do that right now because we're at 30 minutes, so I'm going to stop with part 1 of this lecture.